So welcome back. I'm trying to get up to the top. This idea, today we are focused a lot on just wrapping up your negotiations. And in East Asia, since that's the focus of the class, a big part of negotiations is understanding your relationship with that person you're directly negotiating with, and understanding the relationship of the people in the group involved. And so we are going through a PPT that has lots of different details, lots of examples, but at the same time, we're also going through articles. So you can see here, for example, next week, this is the PPT I'm going to talk about, and all of you have access to these files. These are just extra articles, research articles, showing somebody has researched something related to the topic. And if you as students share some of this information related to the topic, a summary of these articles, for example, you will get extra points for it. Today, there are several extra things to talk about. Here is the old video from many years ago. I don't know if it was 10 years ago or something when I was teaching it. Hopefully, you can learn something from me teaching international negotiations. There's lots of information there. And then there's another article. So I invite anyone today to comment on what this is talking about. Going once, going twice, 3 times.
This article, I haven't read the whole article yet. I haven't finished it, but I was reading the first introduction one, and it says they did a research on Korean and Taiwan and China and Japan. They did a research on these countries, like the style of negotiation styles of these countries, and they said Koreans tend to say no in the negotiation often than the Japanese or Chinese people. But when they did a research on Taiwanese people, they found out that the Taiwan's culture of negotiation is a little bit like the Korean one.
Right. Thank you very much. Would you like to read this part about the Korean details so everybody understands even more about what you just said? You summarized a very important part of international negotiations, but basically it was just one small paragraph in an article, but that's very important. So I'll definitely give you lots of marks for that. Can you go ahead and read that? Can you see it, or do you want me to make it bigger?
No, I can see it. I have the paper open. So you want me to read it out loud?
You talked about Korea, you talked about Taiwan, but Korea is obviously very important for us. Can you read that?
Okay, Korea. Perhaps one of the more interesting aspects of this study is the contrast of the Asian styles of negotiation. Non-Asians often generalize about the Orient. Our findings demonstrate that this is a mistake. Korean negotiators used considerably more punishments and comments than did the Japanese. Koreans used the word no and interrupted more than 3 times as frequently as the Japanese. Moreover, no silent periods occurred between Korean negotiators.
Awesome. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So are there any comments from people in our group that want to argue or talk about this?
Yes, maybe me. So I think we learned that Japanese negotiation styles using a lot of pauses to maybe show their consideration for a topic. So this kind of shows the differences between Korea and Japan, I think, since the article states that the Koreans are not using very much, are not using a lot of pauses. And I think I also read in the article that the Japanese and the American style aren't that different from each other. It's just that you have to pay more attention to how people are saying things with the Asian culture and not just what is said.
Right. So in here is the American style. It starts, talking about it's similar to the German style. So Pia, would you like to read about the German style?
Yes, the behaviors of the Western Germans are difficult to characterize because they fell toward the center of almost all the continua. However, the Germans were exceptional in high percentage of self-disclosure at 47% and the low percentage of questions at 11%.
Okay. In general, what they're talking about here is how each country interacts with negotiations. And so part of what they're saying, if you've read this, has anybody read it? Do you understand what this means related to the full disclosure and the rest of the article? There is quite a lot, 18 pages of information, but they're generally summarized here. There's a little bit more information. Anybody else want to summarize or help explain what this information is talking about? No? It's very good to understand. As we talked about, I believe in last class, we were saying that Germans usually are very direct and they're focused clearly, it seems focused openly on the negotiations. I believe what this is talking about is that the Germans will provide almost whatever information you ask for within the negotiations. They're very open and very direct. However, other countries are a little bit different. And if we understand that, I definitely want you to understand each of these. So it's talking about Korea, it's talking about Taiwan, Russia, Germany, France style, United Kingdom style, Brazil style, United States style. Then it goes on, and there's a different article here that talks about negotiations and example A, example B. If this is the example, what do you choose, A or B? Here's another example. Do you choose A or B? Here's another example. Do you choose A or B? And then it explains what each means. And so it's talking about your the cultural aspect. It's not exactly a Hofstede cultural dimension. It's not exactly a Trompenaar cultural dimension, but this is negotiation cultural dimensions. Each culture, and what they're saying is nationality, has a tendency or a stereotype to do certain things in negotiations. So I would like to hear from you guys, what are some international stereotypes that you can and you should have in your mind when you go into a negotiation or when you're preparing for a negotiation? But no matter what stereotype you have, when you get into the negotiation, you have to check it's true. So you prepare for the negotiation using that stereotype. What are some possible stereotypes? We started talking about them here. Anybody in the class? So Yasser, you started and you were talking about Korea. What is a summary of the stereotype? 1 or 2 points?
Well, I guess the stereotypes depends on the country. So if I was negotiating with someone from, let's say, United States, I would definitely try to get to the point. I would try to, show the actual plan, and I would just want to get to the business rather than trying to build relationship with that negotiator. But if I was dealing with the Korean person or people when negotiating, I would try to be more friendly, I guess, and
Korea, friendly. It says here they punish people. and they have commands. I'm going to like sue you. They don't say sue you, but there are more punishments and commands than other cultures. Can somebody explain an example of that? What we're generally talking about? How is Korea different than somebody else? This says Koreans, they use the word no, and they interrupt people more than 3 times as many times as the Japanese. So the Japanese almost never say no. Koreans say no at least 3 times more than the Japanese. And they interrupt. Which culture is the extreme of that? Which cultures do not interrupt during negotiation statements? You remember? You want to guess?
Germany.
Maybe it's because Koreans don't like to something like lose in the negotiation or try to benefit as much as possible in the negotiation.
Okay, so UNO is saying Koreans don't like to lose. It's more like a competition, perhaps, with UNO in a negotiation. And when he's in this negotiation competition, he wants to win. So if somebody is starting to say something and the other person is starting to say something that's really helping them and really making the other side look bad or win some sort of negotiation, the Korean side, according to UNO, will basically try to stop the other person and explain it or help that other side. Okay, that's one side. So they're talking about that here. Yes. But my question was, what country is the opposite of that?
Germany. Was that Germany?
Germany and United States, they're saying they do not interrupt other people. I have been working internationally so much with 128 different countries. My culture, maybe you should not use it as an example. I'm not a regular North American. I'm not a regular American, not a regular Canadian. I have culture from many different places I've worked. So don't judge me. I will interrupt you sometimes to try to keep the overall group happier. But yes, what they're saying is in Germany and in United States, they did interrupt one another less frequently than all others. So basically they're saying they didn't really interrupt people. We'll let the other person say what they want to say, and then they will respond. Why would somebody do that? In this country, we're looking at the individual details, but also the idea of being a professional. And some people say, if you just argue back and forth, then you're probably not a professional. That's what the American thought may be. And so if some child, an American person might think, like a person from New York or Toronto, maybe they think children, they don't know what they're talking about. They're saying all sorts of crazy things. We'll let them say whatever they want to say, let them vent, express their emotions. Once they're finished, then we can just say, okay, the reality is this, or here's a fact. You can't argue with the facts. And so the American wins. And they look far more professional. That is the view from some Americans. I'm not saying it's the view of everyone. I'm just saying that's what some of this research is talking about. Great. What are some of the other things? We talked about other countries. Hopefully you definitely know about United States style. You know about the Chinese style. You know about the Korean style. We didn't talk about Northern China. China is huge, 1.4 billion people. Although Gert Hofstede, he says everybody in the country is stereotypically the same. But we know for a fact that's not true. Even in small country Canada, only 30 million people, 38 million people, we still have very distinct French culture different than the English culture. And there are many Canadians that are Cuban or Mexican or German or French, or each part of Canada has many distinct neighborhoods and cultures. So there are differences. India has more than 1,000 different cultures and languages just within India. China also, similarly, there's Northern China, which is very distinct. So let's go through and anybody understand how Northern China is distinct? What do you see from this paragraph? If you share something, you get points. The more you contribute to class, the more you're helping the group, which is a vital part of East Asia, the better. I am giving a point to anybody that either reads this or summarizes this.
It says Chinese people are more likely give classified information than the Koreans, but they also say no and you and silent periods. So does that mean they're likely they're like Korean people, or?
So the idea of no, it's, I believe this sentence, it's not saying that the people say no. It's the idea of no. In Germany and in Canada and in the United States, no means no. If you're thinking no, you say no, it's clear. But in Japan, if you're thinking no, what's the polite way to say you must shut up? You must not make the other person look bad. If you say no to somebody, that's meaning that the other person is making sort of a mistake, so that you're making them look bad. In Japan, for example, you bump into people, and in Korea, you're not even traditionally supposed to say sorry. Why? Because if I'm walking and I hit you, that is a mistake. And then if I turn around and say sorry for it, I embarrass you again because I'm reminding you there was a mistake. So there's two loss of face. There's two problems. Hitting you is a problem, and then turning around and apologizing is a problem. So some people don't apologize as much as in Germany or in Canada or USA. And the same thing, they don't say no as much. They're trying to make the other person look good. So even if I bumped into you or you bumped into me, I don't look for an apology. I try to pretend it never happened, even if I have a sore ankle or something from the problem. So this idea of no, Chinese are the same. What they're saying, it's similar. The idea of you have a problem, you bumped into me, they don't say as much. Similar, it's similar to the Japanese, that they don't say no very much, and they don't say it's your problem, you hit me, you bumped into me. Versus in the United States, it's very clear, you're making a mistake, you need to be fired. Or the minister did it, or the engineer did it. We say an individual is to blame. They don't do it very much in Japan and in China. But what they do is very important. This ties this article to the other article. What is the relationship focus with the negotiation? Can you look at this a little closer and try to understand what does it mean? What's this asking questions? What is this? Information exchange. What does that mean? Can you see this well, or do you want me to make it bigger?
Yeah, I would like to have it a little bit bigger. It's very small on my screen. I can imagine the exchange is more focused on trying to understand how the other people are seeing the negotiation, maybe to better understand what they want to further get to an agreement. Maybe it's similar to the American style, you hear out what they have to say, so you know how to answer.
Okay, yes, good. Can we say a little bit more to clarify it a little bit more? Because so many people have different thoughts and understandings, many people still might misunderstand what we're talking about. What does this mean? Information exchange strategy, information exchange tactic. They're not saying no, they're not saying you, but they focus on information exchange strategy. How would you do that? What does that mean?
I would try to get as much information as possible from the opposite party, because with this strategy, I can also profit from it because I can understand what the other person wants. And so I can say what I want and maybe like find a better common ground to negotiate.
Yes, but almost exactly perfect. You find it by asking questions. They ask a lot of questions, and the questions they ask or the statements they give, they're not simple. It's not just a yes, no answer. There's a strategy, usually a very smart strategy, similar to a lot of people that have an incredible amount of wisdom. They don't just say regular words. They use words sometimes that have a different meaning, or two meanings, or three meanings, or very special meanings. And if you don't understand those other meanings, sometimes the Chinese or those very intelligent people will just think, well, you're not really that experienced. You don't really know what we're talking about. You need to develop more. And they may lose respect for you. Why is that important? Because the Chinese are not in it just for them, just today. They're interested in developing what they say is a long-term strategy. They want to partner with a supplier or a company or a buyer for many years. And they don't want to partner with an idiot. They don't want to partner with a foolish person that doesn't really understand details. So they want a lot of information to know, not just about the price of the product, but they want to know, how do you think? How do you react? How do you answer things? If sometimes the Chinese will try to make you angry, they will try to get you to go crazy just to see how do you manage stress. Because if they're going to partner with you and you're doing business for 10 years in the future, and then 1 year later, a big customer starts negotiating with you and you explode and say bad things, you're going to lose that customer. So the Chinese want to find out, before you potentially lose those customers, how do you manage yourself? So the information exchange is trying to find out lots about you, not just that product sale, but about the relationship and potential partnering. They're trying to find out a lot. So small details that a naive person or a person that is inexperienced with negotiations, or a person that is inexperienced with sales or business or Chinese culture, somebody that doesn't really know what they're talking about, they're going to be identified, and the Chinese side will see that we don't match. We're not going to be able to have a good partnership going forward because you don't have the ability to help us very well. So you're not going to get as good of a negotiation result, regardless of just those details. So this is just one example, and that's what they're talking about with Northern China. Let's go over to that next part. Has anybody read this? How savvy are you with negotiations? Can you guys see this? I want you guys to, first of all, is there anybody that wants to present? I'm explaining detailed negotiations between American style, Western style versus Asian style. That's what this paper is talking about. Almost the exact same thing that we just said in the other paper, but very different answers. This is going to be a test. Here is the essay for the test, and you have to pick A or B. Please write that down either in the Facebook group or in the Zoom chat. What do you prefer? If you have something you want to share, please tell me before I start this quiz. Otherwise, we're going to go through this quiz. So hopefully everybody understands. As soon as possible, just write, you pick A for your answer or you pick B. And the question is, you are trying to negotiate with somebody and you have contracted with a manufacturer to produce a shipment of bicycles. After signing the contract, you receive credible information that this manufacturer has had quality problems, and in particular, the bicycles being produced for your shipment rattle. That means they shake and make some sort of crazy sounds when you're using them. Your bicycles are supposed to be shipped next week. Which of the following describes what you prefer? Which of the following how would you react? You would immediately go to the plant and check on the quality problem, and then you tell the plant manager that the rattling must be fixed before the bikes are shipped. Or do you pick number B? You go to the plant, test a few bikes, then you take the plant manager for a bike ride in the countryside, away from people outside. After the ride, you ask, do all of the bikes rattle? Will the rattling be a problem for the buyer? Not you, for the buyer, and then you leave. So, Dong, can I hear how many people in the chats wrote A? Not just the names, but just how many people wrote A, how many people wrote B?
I haven't seen anybody, but I see only one. But only one, so Joshua choose B, Pia choose B.
Your names. Saying names might be individualistic focus.
Sorry, yes, my bad.
B's. And next question is, does anybody want to try to talk about if they think A is popular in your country, or is B type of answer popular in country? So that was just the first one. I'm going to go through 3 different examples like this, just like what we said. And I want everybody to write this down, and then just write down next to your answer A or B, write down you're either Asian, or write down your answer and then write Western. Okay? You don't need to have your name.
Yes. So I saw some people posting their answer. So I see, wow, one more. So mostly B. So B get 4 answer for that, and A is 3, 2.
Okay? Let's go on to the number
6 people go for A.
the
4
3
people goes for B.
details. So in example number 2, anybody wants to help me read this before I get
Can I vote? Can I vote? I also go for B.
I want somebody to read example number 2, please.
Your raw materials costs have skyrocketed due to circumstances beyond your control. You need to reopen a contract with your biggest customer and negotiate a higher price to cover these costs. Which of the following opinions are better describes how you would react?
Okay. How are you going to react? A, you meet with the customer and calmly explain unavoidable circumstances that have affected your raw material costs, focusing on the facts. Then you ask to renegotiate the price. Or do you believe in your area, your home area, you meet with the customer, you express your appreciation as well as your company's gratitude for the relationship, and then you also express sorrow for the potential impact of the skyrocketing raw materials costs on the relationship. Then you plead, we need your help. Again, write down A or B and either your Asian next to the answer or your Western. Next, number 3. Who else is here today? UNO, can you read example number 3?
You would have identical a great opportunity to expand your business by negotiating a joint venture with an other company. You need to get information about this company's need and promise priorities. Which of the following options would you prefer?
Good. And so the options are here. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you so you can see it easily.
A, the other side about their priorities and give them only a little information about your own. B, don't ask direct question, instead indirect, and try to deduce what the other side priorities are by listening to their reactions to your proposals.
Great. So we stop there. There's just those 3 quizzes, activities. And can anybody in class, everybody try to analyze what are these possible answers? Are people from Asia picking A? Are people from Western countries picking A? What are most answers and where do they come from? What do they represent? Any comments? I don't see them, so I need your help.
I'm looking at the chat and I can see that Pia is always picking the A one as a Western. And I can see a lot of Asian people are choosing B.
A Westerner, I'm not supposed to interrupt, but because I have so much intercultural experience, I apologize to you, Jasper. Yasser. Please continue. I really am grateful that you are more active than anybody else today, so that's great. I love that, but I don't want the other quiet people to be shy even more. I don't want the quiet people to be even quieter. And if we point out anybody making a mistake or anybody associated with something, they may become embarrassed unless we're saying they're winning a prize, right? Actually, that's wrong. Even giving people a prize, if it's an individual prize, sometimes that will make them embarrassed, because in Asia, I have had students where I give the student a prize and they start crying and go outside of the class because they're embarrassed. They feel like they're insulting every other student, saying, ha, 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 you are all stupid, even though they want a prize. So I don't think it's a good idea to identify one person doing something. So let's continue to analyze these. But if we can say just Western people, that's safer, versus Asian people, that's safer. Hopefully it will make people understand. So what do the Asians say? Can you identify that? Have Asians picked A or picked B?
Maybe Asian pick
I see.
B
Oh yeah, go ahead.
in the example 3.
Okay. What about the other ones? We have 3 different examples here.
So I see for Asian, so most people pick B.
So this,
And I think it's also to the reality I can see.
okay, can you explain that?
Like for example, when we go to get something, we want to see it directly and check it quality, and we can feel that, and we can compare the different products together, and we can reduce, negotiate with the seller. So so that's why we can see that, you know, traditional selling in Asia, particularly in Vietnam. So the people still prefer going to the shop and check it, see that and check it directly.
Okay, I hope the students understand this. Jomo, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Can you read this this paragraph, the type of your intuitive choices?
Your intuitive choices provide a good litmus test of your approach to negotiate. If you initially choose A in each situation, and if further information do not sway your choices, you have a mainstream American approach to negotiations.
Australian, yes. A generally is the typical American answer. That's just what it's saying. Not always true, but according to this stereotype, it's true. Good, please continue.
If you initially choose B in each situation, you may not be United States, and you certainly do not subscribe to the typical American approach to negotiation. If you switched from A to B when you learned you were negotiating with the Asian company, you no doubt have had some significant global negotiation experience.
Good. So they go on and they talk about the cultural differences, but that paragraph right there, I see why. I understand why the people choosing B, I understand why they choose B. Do you? What is the difference with a B answer here? How is A answer different than the B answer? It's the same situation, but
I think it's because the culture different. So in Asian environment, so the people are kind of influenced by surrounding impacts like the other people or the other customers. So kind of like one people want to buy something, so they might be asking information around, or they could ask the other customers who use that product. For example, they ask their opinion, idea, experience, so before they decide for their own idea for the decision, the last decision.
good. Any students in the class want to add to this? What about, why does this talk about indirect questions? Why does B, the Asian, talk indirectly about the price? For example, the price of this chair, $100, that is a direct question, but this says Asians don't ask direct questions. They are more indirect.
Because maybe because the Western people focus on the negotiation directly itself, but however, Asian people focus more on relationship with the partners.
Right. This indirect attitude is not focused on the chair. It's not focused directly on the price. It's focused usually on the relationship. One reason could be your face. What do I mean by that? If I ask, how much is the price of this? And you have to tell me it's a very expensive price, more expensive than average. What happens to your face value when I know you're telling me a crazy expensive price? What happens to your face, your image, your reputation?
You might be embarrassed to ask for too much, or to say a wrong number that doesn't appeal to the buyer. So I think Asians prefer to talk about it, not directly, but I guess that's why it's a good negotiation strategy to ask indirectly, to be more polite in finding out their real opinion.
Great. Can anybody remember what I said about the definition or defamation law? What is defamation in China, Japan, or Korea? What are some words related to defamation? One more time. What are some words related to defamation that you could use those keywords in just answering that question? I'll help you. In some countries, like in Korea, you are not allowed to make anybody look bad. You're not allowed to harm their image or their reputation. Anybody that harms their image or harms their reputation could go to jail for up to 7 years. just for harming their image, even if it's true. So that relates to their negotiation. If I ask you a price and you have to tell me it's a crazy high price, that's going to make you look bad. And that's harming your image, harming your reputation. That's making you look crazy or greedy or foolish. And so you can't really do that. You're supposed to identify details with a lot more Edward Hall details. The North Americans just use words, and the word has a meaning. Understand that word, you understand my meaning, nothing else is important. But in Asia, because you could make somebody look bad by accident and go to jail, you have to be better. You have to be a good negotiator, to be a successful business person, you have to not only use the words, but use the words that always make the other person look good, but at the same time, there are secret meanings, so you understand the background. Where is he coming from? Why is he saying that? If you read this article, it explains more about how they will ask questions once, for example, and see your facial expressions, how you're going to respond to that pricing question. And then they might talk about something else. And then they will come back and ask the similar idea, but with different words, maybe slightly different question, to find out if your question, or if your answer changes. If your answer changes, that means that answer is not actually fixed, or it's not that important to you. But if the answer is the exact same, then you know that they can't really change. It is a solid, hard part of the negotiation. There's not going to be much change. And so just by doing something like that, seeing if somebody changes a little bit, shows you have ability to negotiate more. And so who is Edward D. Hall? Anybody remember? Hofstede talks about power distance. He talks about individualism, what we talked about. He talks about uncertainty avoidance, and he talks about masculinity or career aggressiveness. Edward D. Hall, what does he say? No. Edward Hall, he talks about high context communicators versus low context communicators. High context means you use the environment. You use the facial expression. You use the attitude of other people. When you're asking the question, if somebody in the background goes, something like that, when they're not supposed to show any expression, but somebody lower level does something like that, you know it's important. And it's not from the words, it's the high context, it's just the environment. So some countries have that high context culture, like in East Asia. Other countries, like Canada, United States, some places in Asia, some places in Europe, they don't care about the environment. They don't care about the context. They only care about the word, and that one word has the one meaning. So it's just several words, but nothing else. So when you are negotiating in Asia, please practice a lot. Please research a lot. Please try to understand who is that other person. What is that other person's actions, or what does he need to do? What does he need to do for his boss? When he comes or she comes, how many are coming? The number of people coming shows how important it is. More people coming to the negotiation, it's more important. Do those people have the ability to sign the contract? Sometimes you will meet not just a big group of people, but you'll meet a big group of people and negotiate today, and then tomorrow you'll meet a different group of big people. Tomorrow you'll meet another group with many people negotiating, and again, they still don't have the ability to sign the final contract. It's just the idea of that, what we said where was it? What was was that over? Yes, here, the information exchange. Make sure you understand that information exchange. It's pretty important. Try to understand all of that. You can't give one answer or one statement to train somebody about it. It takes experience. What about as we saw, Chinese negotiate different than Japanese, different than Koreans. It says, for example, that the Koreans, they are saying no more often than the Japanese, and they're using punishments. First of all, I want to point out that I think this was not written by a Korean. It was written by somebody from a different culture, so they could misunderstand. But regardless, somebody said it. Let's try to analyze this. What happens if you have a Korean American? He was born in New York City. He lived his whole life in New York City. He's part of a big company. He comes over to negotiate with a Samsung person. They're both big companies. They're at the same level. That should impact the relationship. How? But again, that New York person, it's a Korean ancestry person, comes back to Korea. Just those things. What is the high context? What could you have in your mind that might impact the negotiation? Any ideas? Let's
When you're negotiating with that person, you might have to mix up the characteristics of a Western and Eastern, so that negotiation can go well.
So the New York person and the regular Korean person in Samsung, they're negotiating. And so I think I heard you need to understand one person is American and one person is Korean. Okay, you should, even before you get to negotiation, think about that. Good. What else? What if it's a lady that comes? What if it's just a Caucasian person, an Irish American person coming from New York? How will that change the details? Any ideas? No? Give you a couple of comments before I start talking. Usually, the high-level people are older people in Korean society now. The older people were raised, people, especially people that are older than myself, they were not allowed to go outside of Korea unless they had special government signed paper allowing them to leave the country. Did you know that? And to get that paper, you have to do a very special exam. It's like not just a TOE exam, it's like the GRE exam. It's like a high-level university MBA school exam. And they're tricking you, trying to test. This is back in the 70s or 80s. The government would make somebody that wants to go to New York, they have to pass an exam, and they're checking how loyal they are to Korea. Are they going to say good things about Korea or bad? If they're going to say anything bad or even have a question about making the country look bad, they can't go out of Korea. Only if they're loyal to Korea and they're good to show Korea is good, then they got that stamp to be able to travel. That's, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my research understanding of several years ago, the traditional person that was raised in Korea and is now a high-level person at big companies. That's how they were made. And so that person is now negotiating, and they're pure Korean, with somebody else that if they were an Irish American in New York, they're just viewed as a regular American. And a regular American doesn't understand Korea. They don't really understand Urinara. They don't really, they're not part of the Korean family according to the Guangxi and the Korean dynamics. So they're somebody else, but Korea has usually tried to copy and learn from the European or the American or the Western styles. They've tried to use those to learn. So they're viewed as sometimes a good person, like an educator, like a teacher in some ways, but it's a teacher that's not from here. They don't understand home. However, if it's a Korean American, some people may say that they were Korean, but then they left. And now they're coming back trying to take money from us. What does that mean? What is the definition of that? Somebody that was us, but then left, went away, and now they're taking something from us. They're taking products, they're taking money from us. What is that? How does that look to some people? Anybody?
Yeah, maybe it looks like he's almost like a trader.
Right.
A trader.
If you do more research on this, a lot of the descriptions when non-Koreans come into Korea, they will find it's hard to really fit in. It's hard to get into the Korean family. Sometimes it's hard to even go to a Korean person's home, their living room, their dining room, to meet the family, because that's very, very sort of sacred. It's not usually shared with too many outsiders. That idea of home or even marriage, marrying somebody that's not Korean, it's not part of the Korean blood. So yes, you could be considered a traitor. And some research shows the Korean Americans, Korean Canadians, or how do you say this? Korean Germans, Korean French. Sometimes they face a lot harder time doing business in Korea. Same thing with the Chinese, same thing with the Japanese, sometimes especially in Japan, because they're viewed sometimes, whether it's true or not, research has shown they could be viewed as a traitor. So even if they're giving presents, even if they're smiling, even if they're being kind, even if they're trying to give a special discount, they could be thought of as a traitor. So it could be easier for that Irish Canadian or the Irish German person to negotiate rather than a Korean one. So that, and it's not just Korea, it's Korea, Japan, China, it's similar in all of those places. But Korea has the closest, the tightest family control compared to some of those other countries. So that information exchange is pretty important. Anyway, we've talked about quite a bit. There's more details that we could talk about. What else could we talk about today before we go in? And these are different examples. What I just showed are explained in here. These are the links here, the links here. If you do share this stuff, I am using the high context. I'm showing you examples of information. I'm showing you the environment and you can get benefit from it. So we focus every day on these details, these PPT points. But for example, there's also these links. If you look at this link, if you look at this link, if you look at this link, this link, this link, this link, any of these details, it's just extra from the environment. If you share more for the group, you're helping the group. Especially if you help somebody else in the family do better, look better, practice better, because we are a practice group in the family for after you're finished with class, then you go out and you negotiate with the real world. We want to share with you information so that you're better prepared later. Whatever you present, try to get feedback so that you're a better negotiator later outside after the class is finished. And so if you can't present this, we will give away lots more points. Is that clear? Who do we have? We have 10 people online here. Thomas, I haven't heard too much from you today. Can you tell me what is this showing? Summarize this idea.
Well, so it was in the last class, and we talked about that different gestures means different things in different cultures. So, for example, the one from Vietnam, it's something that is, for example, like really good in Canada or like the US, that it means good luck. But in Vietnam, it's something that we shouldn't use because it means that we kind of, I don't know if like I'm saying it correctly, but that we kind of like do not want to speak to the person anymore, and that we just like don't want to have anything to do with them anymore.
Right. So the idea is many things that you think are normal, many things that you think are cute. Like I think this is cute. I think this is cute. I think this is cute in my culture. I think it's normal, good, cute. But in other parts of the world, it could be the opposite. It's the same thing as going, a really bad thing. This Brazil, it's not just Brazil, but that idea of, anyway, some cultures, it can mean the opposite. So you have to prepare, research the other culture. Assume what you assume is wrong. Try to understand anything you've learned could be wrong for some reason. And your stereotypes should help you understand, but they too could be wrong. They have to be checked. Again, I think this is a good thing to do. It means I want to help you, or good luck, have a good time. Other countries, it means no, stop, I don't like it. Same thing over here. It's good in some places, bad in others. Right, so we've gone through, there's several of these. What is this book saying? What about Jung-Moon, or sorry, Jacob here? What is this? What do you get from this? What do you remember from this?
I actually cannot remember. Maybe I was absent.
Okay, Jung-Moon, do you remember this whole idea? And again, this is the Harvard negotiation project. What does
I remember that there's a BAFNA related to this, and this book was based on Western culture, which doesn't apply with the all the Asian culture.
Right. And can you explain a little bit more about BATNA? Because that is very good and it is very important. The whole book is not bad. It's very good for American style negotiation. But this, at least, in my opinion, is good for anywhere in the world. So what does this BATNA mean?
Well, as alternative to negotiated agreements, like how to negotiate well.
What does that mean? Anybody in class? I don't understand. What do you mean a best alternative? I either take your chair, you're selling a chair, I either buy your chair or I buy a different I buy your chair or I buy a chair from some other competing company. Is that what it means? No.
No, it's how to get the best profit for both parties. So they should, even if they can't get everything that they wanted, they should try to find a new way to at least somehow profit from the deal, I think.
Okay, yes, you're getting much closer, but it would help if you explain more about somehow. You said somehow profit, or you said get something out of the deal. Many people think I get the chair or I don't get the chair. So what do you mean about somehow.
Well,
Usually
yeah.
expect this. One thing versus one thing.
We had, for example, the orange example, which showed very much how communication sometimes is the only problem. So you should really explain why you need the product, for example, and maybe you figure out that what you really wanted is something very different from your partner, and that it's not just either I get all of it or nothing, but that it's also possible to share the orange, and one gets the peel and the other one gets the fruit. So it's really about finding out what the other person wants so that both can get a great deal out of it.
Did I not show in here? Where was the information exchange? Where was it that I talked about that information exchange? You remember? That's very important. So that idea, you said, give lots of information to get more information. And so what I'm saying is, yes, that is good, but be careful. If you just give lots of information, remember, in Asia, information is centralized. So any detail of information is very important. The higher level people, the valuable people, the smart people have all of the information, and the low level people have almost no information. So if you just walk up to a deal and you give them all the information, the other person has your information and you have nothing or little about them. So you are low level, they are high level, right? So that information exchange, I think it was the Northern Chinese. Yes, here. Good people, good negotiators. They're not just giving lots of information. They're asking questions for an information exchange tactic. They're trying to get the other person's information as much as possible. Sometimes they want lots of information without giving you their information. Some of the best business people I've ever met, some of the best negotiators I've ever met, soon as you meet, you feel like you're best friends. For example, you walk up to the guy and he looks at your face and he sees you're a little bit grumpy and he says, "Oh, God damn it, I just had a really grumpy day at work." Have you ever had a day when this type of person meets you and it really pisses you off? And then that's all he said. That's all he said. He didn't say his name. He didn't say his company. He didn't say he had that. He just said there is a situation. But most people will say, "Yeah, my boss just pissed me off, man. I'm from," and then he will say, "Yeah, okay, what company were you from?" Like, "Yeah, I'm from this company." And like, "Yeah," and then he will say something bad to make you feel good again, and you keep giving more information. But you don't even know his name. You don't even know if he's feeling good or bad. He just gave you an example of something, so now you're his best friend just by venting. That information exchange ability to get the other person to give you information without you giving critical details is a really good ability to have. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. So that's what we're talking about here. That best alternative to a negotiated deal. Pia described it very well, but her words, her specific words were, as I recall, she gives lots of information in the negotiation. And that could be misunderstood. You're supposed to have a lot of information sort of exchange, like they give you valuable information. That is good. And you just don't go direct. What is the price? That is good. And so you don't just ask for one thing, you try to ask about the boss or other people or even the bus ride to get that person feeling good, because after they feel good, then they will share more information. So best alternative, try to understand not just this is what you want, but what else can they give? Yes, that's very important. If there's any questions about that, let me know. I'm going to jump forward to this. What did we say here? What did we say here? What is this study showing?
I think it showed that people who are quite rich get even greedier and expect even more from you, even if you are poorer than them.
Right, and so exactly right. So the idea was that if two people, their research was showing, just playing a simple game like Monopoly, when two people are playing a game that has no connection to the real world, it's just a game. Usually you start with, this guy has 500 toy fake dollars, and the other guy has the same amount of toy fake dollars. So if this guy has 500 and this guy has 500, that's normal. But in the game, in their research, they said if this guy starts with 1,000 fake dollars and the other guy only starts with 200, very quickly, when they're doing the game, this guy can buy anything. He feels good, he feels powerful. This guy starts to ask, oh, can I have a break? Oh, can I have a discount? So he is weak, he is powerful. And very quickly, what the research showed is this game of more money goes to their brain and it makes these people think like, I am better than you. You are inferior to me. You don't deserve me. So you need to be generous to be with me. I already have this money. I don't need more. You need to give me more of something to get it. So the people with more, the research shows, tend to feel like they deserve more. Why am I talking about this? Because when you go into a negotiation, if you go into a negotiation and in 2021, 2022, many good people will go to a meeting riding a bicycle. That is good for the environment. Taking a big plane is bad for the environment. Taking a truck that spits out a lot of the gases, bad gases, that's bad for the environment. So taking a big truck is usually a sign of success. Taking a bicycle, some people think is just for poor people. If you go to that negotiation, especially with international people, and they see you riding a bicycle, they might think that you're not high class. And so automatically, just showing up, if you both have suits, but the other person saw you took a bicycle, the other person took a Mercedes car, this guy with the Mercedes car might start thinking he deserves more. Be careful. Don't forget, in some countries that are the most equal, like Scandinavia, I believe it was Denmark, the king of the country takes the public bus to work. Versus in Korea, East Asia, the leader of a company or the leader of a country, they don't go anywhere on the bus. They basically have many different, almost soldiers driving around, preparing for them, protecting them, treating them very special. Very high level, higher level than average. That image impacts your negotiation. So that's kind of what we're talking about there, spending a little bit too much time. If you have any questions, please talk about it. Then there is several examples in here about the idea of different countries. Japan versus Korea, what is the organizational structure and the management systems? The idea of Japan's ownership and management versus the Korean ownership and management. The image can impact your negotiations. For example, in Japan, they have the company, they have their own bank. Their bank can make their own money. So maybe the idea of the price is less important. Versus in Korea, they can't. They don't have their own banks. Banks are completely separate. Samsung does not have a bank. Things like that. if we're moving on. Simple, fun things. Like when we talk about North Americans, Canadians, we will see 100 people, but these 3 people are in a group. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, they are in a group. These people are 4 people in a group. But this group is very different than this group, very different than this group, different than this, different than this. And they stay together. Versus over here, almost everyone is connected. So if you make a mistake one place, very quickly, maybe everyone will know here, not here. But this sometimes takes longer. Over here, the information about the company, it's pretty easy to get. A Yellow Pages phone book will say, here is the company, here's the company address, here's the company phone number, here's the CEO's phone number. In Scandinavian countries, it might say the CEO's home address and cell phone number and personal email details, everything's open. Versus over here, it's not. So how do you get into this? Before you go to a negotiation here, you try to find any person to connect you. Many of you were trying to do surveys. And what I heard from you is it was hard to get information. I asked him a question, he didn't answer. I asked him a question, he didn't answer. Well, think about it. How many of you found anybody and asked anybody about, do they have any connections that can help? Maybe this person knows this person knows this person, and this person knows this person. Did you try that Guangxi? If not, reconsider. That may be why you didn't have as much success. Versus you just think you did the work, you asked the question, you couldn't get to the next step, it stopped. That is the Western view. It's not really the advanced view. Try to develop your Guangxi as much as possible, as early as possible. Trump and R, you know about Hofstede, you know about Edward Hall with high context, low context culture. Trump and R is another famous researcher. He is saying that the boss in Asia, in Japan especially, is supposed to have answers to everything. If you are a low-level person in a company, the boss is expected to have all answers. Versus here, in Western countries, the boss is equal. He will just tell you, talk to the engineer, talk to the accountant, talk to the finance guy. They will give you the answer. That loss of face, if you don't have that power, if you don't have that information centralized like here, it makes you look bad. How do you do it? It's impossible. So what happens? This is a hierarchy. These people can't talk to the top of the hierarchy. They can only talk to the next level up. And these higher people, like managers, will filter it and translate it into the next higher level language. And then the managers talk to the directors, and the directors translate it into the VP language. And then the VP language translates it into the CEO language. And so by the time that question rises one level, if the manager knows the answer, he just answers. If the manager doesn't know, he translates it into language that is closer to the CEO's level. So by the time that question gets to the top of the hierarchy, it could have completely different wording, but the CEO can answer. There's a bunch of different examples here. The idea of some places are equal countries, like the Nordic countries. Some places are more hierarchical places. Egalitarian, the idea of in Western countries, if there's a problem, you say the problem. This is too expensive. That makes you look bad. If you were charging me a high price, you were trying to steal from me. You are greedy. So that's making you look bad. You can't do that. You should talk about something else. For example, let's go for a bike ride and see this bike ride is the same as the other bike ride. Is there something we can do together so that we both continue you to have successful relationships, knowing that the competitors are dropping their prices. You're not.
Excuse me, Professor.
Right.
I think it's we can wrap up our class now. Some students can go to another class.
Right.
Yes.
To wrap up, since we're finished with negotiations, next week we'll be talking about Vietnamese topics. Here is more information about negotiation, but it's a good video talking about the Japanese versus American negotiation. This one's talking about the idea of American negotiators, Japanese negotiators, Chinese negotiators. Please make sure you're comfortable with these. If you find any other information or article, share that with class. The more you help our community, the more points you will get. Likewise, next week, we're talking about Vietnamese management. Please be prepared to talk about all of the details we already have. Like in here, this Vietnamese, this folder has many different articles, plus the PPTs, plus other YouTube videos and things. Try to share some of this stuff, the extra stuff that you think is important with the class in order for helping the whole community. If you stay quiet, if you only focus on your grade, you'll not do as well. Thank you. Class is finished. Any other questions? Please let me know.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, Professor.